Okay, Erev Tov, everybody. Welcome back. I think, what are we, part 7 this week?
Part 7, yes.
Part 7, okay.
March
Shmita
14th.
cycle, March the 14th, 2022. And the one with the rise, rabbinic response to the rise of reform, always fascinating. And Vakasha, Dr. Marc, it's all yours.
As we move into the Ides of March, I said at the end of last class, I
Pi Day. Today's Pi Day, though.
I ran out of, I didn't have anything else to add, and I said that people were going to email me, and lo and behold, I got so much I wanted to be able to get to it. I'm going to leave the bat mitzvah till next week, but just a few things. And for those who wanted to know where I got this piece about the Amshinover Rebbe and the Benedictine liqueur with the cross on it, that when someone was hesitant about using it, the Amshinover, who was known as a great tzaddik, said, enough, open the bottle already, and let's say l'chaim. You can find it in this book, From Shedlitz to Safety, a Young Jew's Story of Survival. I learned about this book on my classes on the Mir Yeshiva, because he ended up going to Shanghai, although he wasn't, he was at different yeshivas. On page 88, you can get the story. We're going to talk about music today, music and davening. And wait till you see later some of the reasons given. The whole issue of music, before we get to the questions of an organ and instruments, it was just singing. That was what the issue was also. Can you have singing? Something we take for granted. That's not the way they did it. At the most, you had a chazan who sang, but the idea that you'd have singing with a choir and that people can join in and that it was done through tunes as opposed to like chazanis, that was the controversy. And wait till you hear what some of the Gedolim, they would find all our davenings as puzzle the way we do it. But in terms of musical instruments, which raises its own problems, I was going to show you a video of my son in yeshiva, but Martin sent me something which is even better, I think. So let me show you what Martin sent me, and this is davening. Now, I have nothing against it. I'm just showing that this is the sort of thing that was considered inappropriate. The whole idea of reforms. What is a reform? We all have reforms. We're going to see. The question is the reform halakhically permissible? And is it hashkafically permissible? But there's all sorts of reforms that go on. When we understand the word reform with a small r, just means a change to what you've been doing. Now, often these reforms are conscious. You make a decision. We're going to do sermons. We're going to, in the vernacular, we're going to get rid of piyutim. All these things we're going to see, and some of them are the exact same things that the reformers were arguing just a few generations. And then you have reforms that are just come about sort of naturally without intending. Hey, you all saw this reform. If you're in shul, all of a sudden, this is only the last 15 years or so, Parsha Zachor, no rabbi's ever said to do this, but everyone stands up now. And it's become the minhag that you have to. If you're like me and you don't stand up, people look at you. But as I've said before, that's my bar mitzvah, Parsha. And I've reigned Parsha Zachor, that is Kiseitse, and I know people didn't stand up, and I've asked some rabbis, they said it's like the last 10 or 15 years, but it's the Baal Batim, it's the Hamonam, and many minhagim start from the Hamonam. They both minhagim l'chumra and l'kula, and this business that you have to stand up for Parsha Zachor, again, this is from the Hamonam. I'm convinced of it, just like I'm convinced that the standing up for the weddings, walking down is from the Hamonam. No rabbi ever declared you stand up. And today you should just stand up the whole way. I was at a wedding a few weeks ago, and basically you're standing more than you're sitting because you keep got to get up. You got to get up for the bride, for the groom, for the grandparents, and you got to get up for other elders. So those are different types. Those are not conscious reforms. But here's music that, and I thank Martin for sending it to me. So this is Rosh Chodesh. I guess because Rosh Chodesh was supposed to be a little more joyful, but really it has nothing to do with Rosh Chodesh. If you can do this on Rosh Chodesh, then you can do it on any shacharis that you want. Okay, so not acceptable, is it not? I wonder if you're playing the guitar or blowing the flute there, you sort of, I don't know how much kavanah you could have because you're busy with the notes and everything. But let's say it was people who already davened and they're doing it. Is it a problem? I don't see a problem with it, but understand that this is a reform. The idea that and that looked like a more frum minion or neo Hasidic or something, not so much modern Orthodox. But I mean, since when is it permissible to bring music into shul? While we're going to see with instruments into shul. Well, we'll see they did. It's not, although it happened and then it disappeared for a while, and now they're bringing it back. But you had regular traditional shuls which actually had instruments. So although they're trying to tell you that this is all from the reform, it's not, as we shall see. Thank you, Marc. Okay, I spoke about Heicha Kedushah. I got a few things here about Heicha Kedushah. And first, I have to thank Mike for this. I said, and this is what I thought, it's hard to make any blanket statements because it turns out there's always some other view. I said that the Heicha Kedushah, the best way to do it, the appropriate way is, or I said the appropriate way, is you start davening together with the Chazan, because then you have to feel with Sibor, and as opposed to waiting till after Kedusha. And what I said is actually found, it's explicit in the Ramah, or Achayim, Kuf Chaf Daled, where the Ramah says if you're in a Shas HaDchak, you're worried that the time will pass, and then later, of course, as we know, they extended for other reasons, Bittul Torah, etc. He says, Yochel biyad b'kol ram, v'atzir mispalim imo milo b'milo b'lachash. Exactly what I said, that you start with the Chazan until you finish Kedusha, then you do it privately. But as Mike points out, the Mishnah Brura on the spot, and he's actually quoting the Ber Heitev, says that no, that although the Ramah says that, hold on, let me read you the Mishnah Brura here. He says that if it's not a Shas HaDchak, hold on, he says you shouldn't do that. But then he says, if you have time, if it's not such a Shas HaDchak, it's a Shas HaDchak that you have to do Heicha Kedushah, but it's not such a Shas HaDchak that you have to, you can spend another couple of minutes. The Mishnah Brura says, don't begin with the Chazan, wait till after Kedusha. And he quotes the Ber Heitev, and the Ber Heitev says, the way the Ramah says is how the Bach says it by the Marshal and also Knesset Gedolah, but then he quotes the other opinions. So I guess it's one of these things, whatever you do, you're right, it's okay. Now, regarding Heicha Kedushah, Professor Gershon Bacon from Bar Ilan University, he's been sending me really interesting comments, and he says to me that, I'll read you some of his other comments later if we have time, if not next week. There's actually three possible options of Heicha Kedushah. Hold on, where's the paper I have here? Oh, there's three possible options, he says, not two. Earlier I said two. He says that there's the Rambams where you say it all out loud, like what they do with Spanish and Portuguese. Then there's the one we know of the three brachos out loud, and then everything's silent. And then he says there's actually a third option, that you say the first three and the last two brachot out loud, with the middle one said silently. That's actually mentioned in the Magen Avraham. If you look on Kuf Chaf Daled, that's quoted in the name of Knesset Gedolah. But I tell you that there's actually a fourth way of doing Heicha Kedushah, and that's Rav Eliyahu ben Amozig. We discussed this in the Ben Amozig classes. He thought that the best way to do it, because he thought that the silent Shemon Esrei was very important, so he thought that you should do the entire thing silent together with the Chazan, and only when you come to Kedusha, then the Chazan says it out loud. So there's actually, I think that's original to him though, but there's four options that I know of for Heicha Kedushah. Now, since we're reading from Professor Gershon Bacon, that many of you know the name. I've quoted him in the past. He's done such important work on Agudas Yisrael and East European Jewry. He also says, we spoke last class about Kohanim not doing the bracha with their shoes on. And he says, and I confirm this again, that this is in Mexico, it's everywhere. But he mentions that Rav Avad Yosef was asked about this, about soldiers, and it's not just soldiers, if you look in the tshuva, and he says that there's a heter to do it without, Rav Avad says this, it's in Yechavadas, volume 2, number 13. Rav Avad quotes many sources that say the issue is only if you go stand up on the bima, but if you're down on the ground, then some hold that you need to take your shoes off, and therefore, if it's problematic, if it's difficult to take your shoes off, or if they don't want to, there's a whole history of people who didn't want to. The people didn't want to, then yesh lahem al mi lismoch. You can therefore allow people to do this. And that's incidentally the Syrians. That's what they do. The Syrians. Hold on a second, the Syrians, at least all the Syrian shows I've been at, they don't go on the bima. I emailed a Syrian to ask what he thought, that the Syrians stay at the bottom. You know, they don't go up by the Sefer, by the Aron Kodesh, they stay below. So Rav Avad says that although this isn't the best thing, there's a heter for that. Now, Professor Bacon also mentions that Rav Nissim has the same approach, and indeed Rav Nissim does. It's in Yein Atov number 37, but Professor Bacon says for some reason, Rav Avad doesn't quote Rav Nissim. Well, it's not just for some reason. The reason is known. Rav Avad Yosef and Rav Nissim had big problems, difficulties with each other. And if you look in the Abiyah Omer, he hardly ever quotes Rav Nissim, and he had, put it this way, he just has a negative view about Rav Nissim. And the final point is that two other points that Professor Bacon mentions regarding Israel Jacobson, it's worth mentioning. He says that he wasn't just an innovator in shul practice, also in schools. In Zissen, he had a school with non-Jewish and Jewish students. And he mentions how he was the president of the Consistoire in Westphalia, and then only later with Napoleon's defeat, he moved to Berlin. If you look in the book by Rabbi Hamburger, he discusses a great deal of what was going on in Westphalia. And finally, Professor Bacon mentions, I said that about the name Pesach. Who ever heard of a name of a holiday? And he says, and he told us that he learned this from Professor Gerson Cohen. Hold on a second. Get out of here. That this individual, he's hypothetical. He's never really existed, but supposedly there was someone named I shouldn't say he's hypothetical. Hypothetical Khazar ruler. Maybe he existed, maybe he didn't. I don't know. He's mentioned later on. His name is Hanukkah. You wonder, was it really Hanukkah, but it became? And Professor Bacon also says that, which I didn't know, that there's a genre of Israeli films called Sirte Berekas, which lots of ethnic humor and stereotypes. And one of the most famous is called Chagiga Besnooker, in which the ignorant Mizrahi rabbi is named Chacham Hanukkah. So I thank you very much for that, Professor Bacon. Oh, one more thing he said, and with this, I quoted Rav Sadia Gaon, that our nation is only a nation because of the Torah. He points out that really, if you look in Rav Sadia Gaon, he doesn't say the Torah. He says our nation is a nation by virtue of its laws, Torah Teha, which Rav Kafach mentions, refers to Torah Sheba'al Peh and Torah Shebichtav. So we should be exact. One final thing. Howard mentions as follows. He called my attention to this article. I had said, which is Professor Weider and others, that the washing your feet, taking off the shoes is all due to Islamic influence. And that's the standard view. But Professor, if you want to check out this article, Professor Bar Ilan argues pretty well that this actually predates Islamic practice, that the idea of washing your feet and taking off your shoes goes back. These were people who practiced it already in Talmudic days. So let's leave it there. All very interesting stuff. Thank you all for the comments. Let me get my books here. A lot to cover today. If you recall, we're in the middle of the responsum of Rav Yaakov Chai Recanati, the Rav of Verona. And he was asked about using the organ. And I said that, hold on a second here. I want to stop sharing for a second. Bit of bookmarks. Yeah, now put you back. We said that the last thing I read was that he gave arguments how it should be permissible. There's no issue of rejoicing because you're in shul, that's allowed. And the next paragraph, which we spoke about how this was a dispute that arose in Corfu. They used to sing with music, and then they stopped doing it. And there was a big machokas among the rabbis: should they bring back the singing because of the issues? It maybe destroys kavana. People are talking during this. In the next paragraph, which we're not going to look at, I won't read it inside. There's a whole dispute. Let's say you have a minhag, which appears to go against halacha. And are we concerned about this? Do we try to get rid of it, or we say no, that this is the minhag? We go with it. And if people talk during davening because we're having a lot of singing, that's their problem. And it's a machokes. And Rav Yaakov Chai Recanati sides with the position that basically we should go with the minhag, that way it was, and he quotes authorities. And if people do bad things because of that, that's not our problem. That's not our fault. Now, I'm going to come back to this in a minute because of a book he quotes, and maybe one of you can help me out on the issue. Incidentally, he in his discussion here, he says that in quoting the rabbis, he quotes the different rabbis of Venice, of Corfu, etc. And then he quotes, look at line 2. He's quoting the rabbis who say that you're supposed to do play the music, go back to the way it was. This was agreed by the rabbis at Tzfat and Tveria, and also Chachmei Rodis, that's rose, and also Rushit. So does anyone know what Rushit is? I want to figure out what that is. It's actually Rosetta. If you look in Encyclopedia Judaica, like Rosetta Stone, in the entry on it, you see that in the 16th century, when the Spanish refugees came, there was lots of learned rabbis. And Rosetta, in Arabic, they call it Rashid. So that's what it's referring to there. So that's the whole second paragraph, just speaking about music. And in other words, why does he bring it in? Because if you want to argue that music's a problem, singing's a problem, that it destroys kavana, or people start talking, the chazan's doing his thing, and people start talking, no. There's a long tradition. He shows that you can do this, and if people are going to talk and not have kavana, we don't change our practices because of that. If that's the minhag, that's the minhag. In the final paragraph, he says as follows, and this is when he gets into the organ. He says, so what's the summary? Everything we've seen up to now, and based on the great rabbis, I don't see any isur to play an organ in the synagogue, organo, in honor of Hashem and to sing songs, except for on Shabbos and Yom Tov, except for on Shabbos and Yom Tov, that the Jew cannot play it. Why? Because as Shulchan Aruch says, you can't play instruments. The problem is they might break and you might fix it. After all, think about it. What's wrong with blowing a flute? There's no fire being burnt. There's no malacha, but it's a gezerah that you might fix it. And that's the problem. So then he says, however, al yedei goy, but what about a non-Jew? Kasaf a ber hetev. The ber hetev says, we're going to read this ber hetev in a second, that according to halacha, you can tell a non-Jew before Shabbos to play an instrument on Shabbos. What's the ber hetev referring to? I'll show you in a second. Why can you do that? That is, for the Jew, you can't play the instrument on Shabbos because of the gezerah. And so that's what we call a shus. And to say on Shabbos, in other words, and tell the non-Jew That's also a rabbinic prohibition. So here you have two rabbinic prohibitions. It's called a shvus to shvus. For a good purpose, you're allowed to do it. And then he goes on. Well, he's going to quote the Ber Heitev. So I don't. We're going to see what the Ber Heitev says in a second, what he's quoting him from. But what you see, the conclusion of Recanati, the author of the Piskei Recanati Achronim, is that you can play an organ. You can play an organ on Shabbos. And sorry, the non-Jew can play the organ on Shabbos in shul for you. And he cites as a proof the Ber Heitev. So what's this Ber Heitev? What's going on here with the Ber Heitev? Well, let me show you a few things here. What I'm going to show you now, if you tell someone this Shabbos, they won't believe you that this is black and white in the Shulchan Aruch. They think, sorry, here. They literally won't believe you that this could be in the Shulchan Aruch. But let's look. Okay, in Hilchos Shabbos, hold on a second. Okay, Shin Lamed Ches, 338, Halacha Beis. Yesh Matirim. And when the Shulchan Aruch says Yesh Matirim and he doesn't have another opinion, that's the opinion. Yesh Matirim Lomar Le'eno Yehudi L'Nagen B'Kli Sher B'Chupot. The Shulchan Aruch says Halacha L'Maisa, you can tell a non-Jew to play music at a wedding on Shabbos. And then the Ramah says you can even tell a non-Jew to fix the clay shear, to fix the music, mishum kavod chasam v'kala, in order for the honor of the chasam and kala. Okay, so then that's the first unusual thing, that you can have music. You have let's say a chuppah. They used to have the weddings Friday afternoon, and then they have a big suda. And you can have non-Jews playing. So what does the Ber Heitev? Let me look, just read you the Ber Heitev he's quoting. And then he says, the Ramah says you can even tell the non-Jew to fix the instrument. Ber Heitev says, look in the Magen Avraham, who concludes that it's forbidden to fix the clay shear, but you can tell the non-Jew to play. That is, you can't tell him to fix it, but you tell him to play the music. And then he goes on, the Maharil has a story that once the ruler said you can't use the musical instruments. So he decided that you should take, the Chassan and Kala should go to another city and do the Chasana there so they could play on music. Then he quotes the Radbaz from Egypt, who says that in his land, they were accustomed not to allow a non-Jew to play music. But if the non-Jew came on his own, we don't protest. And the Radbaz says, according to halacha, you can tell him Erev Shabbos to play on Shabbos, because for a Jew, it's only forbidden because of Gezerah. So even the Radbaz, he says you don't tell him on Shabbos, you can tell him Erev Shabbos. This is the Knesset Gedolah quoting, and he says, if you're worried about harama, so that is if you're worried that someone's going to ask the non-Jew on Shabbos, and he's going to say, well, I told him Erev Shabbos, then you can ban it. So here we have explicit in the Shulchan Aruch, without dispute, to the Ramah, that you can play an instrument on Shabbos. So if I tell you now that you can play an instrument on Shabbos, and that is a non-Jew can play an instrument on Shabbos for you, how can you say that it's forbidden to have it in shul? The tshuva of the Piskei Recanati Aroni makes perfect sense. His concern was just, can you play music? And that's the whole tshuva. At the end, he sees this as a simple question. I forgot to put my microphone near me. I don't know if I wasn't sounding so clear. Now, no one said anything, so now you'll get a better sound. But no one said anything, so I think you heard okay. In other words, the Piskei Recanati Achronim, it's only the last paragraph he says that on Shabbos is not a problem either, because why isn't it a problem? Because that's easy. The Shulchan Aruch already says that you can use a non-Jew to play music on Shabbos. That's going to be an issue that you'll see the poskim have to deal with, have to maybe there's a distinction between davening and chassan v'kala, but this itself is interesting. And so let me just spend a minute on this, because as I said, most people have never heard of this. And you try telling people in shul that you could do it. Try bringing in for a Sheva Brachos, because we're going to see they did it for Sheva Brachos also. Try bringing in a non-Jewish band next time you do Sheva Brachos, or you can do a wedding. We're not accustomed anymore to do it Friday afternoon, but you could do it. And Sheva Brachos, obviously, we have it. Here's a sefer to show you that this isn't just something in the past. This is a sefer, Chazon Avadia. Ravad Yosef, so prolific. His final halachic writings is called Chazon Avadia, which it's basically like a Shulchan Aruch, his rulings with all his notes. If you look in Hilchos Shabbos, volume 3, just tell you, this is from 2011. Volume 3, Dine Amira Lagoy, number 16, page 475. He says as follows: Im yesh lefanenu chosen v'kalam Yisrael b'Shabbos shebetoch shivas yamei hamishta. That is, you have a chosen and kala, and it's Shabbos in the 7 days. That is the Sheva Brachos, the week after the Chuppah. Mutar lomar la'anshe tizmoras goyim lavo nagim b'klei shir l'sameach chazon v'kala. Ravad Yosef Paskins halacha l'maisa that at a Sheva Brachos that takes place during Shabbos, you can ask a non-Jews, a non-Jewish band to come play, to have a shus to shus being called mitzvah. As I said, he explains what's the shus. The shus l'nagim b'klei shir is one shus, because there Hashem Yatakim klei shir is another shus. That's one shus, and the other is V'miro Goy is a shus. So shus to shus. Here you have Ravad Yosef, and in his notes he goes through all the sources, all the and also you'll find this in the Chavadas, volume 2, number 7. The same thing. He says that this is the halacha, and he quotes different sources that this was the practice. For example, he quotes the Bach and the name of the Marshal. Shenagu olam heter l'negim b'Shabbos b'klei shir b'chuppah dei goyim. The Marshal, writing in Lublin, is saying in the 1500s, is saying that this is the minhag. This is what we do. And then he quotes a bunch of other sources. Let me give you some examples. Rabbi Goldhaber has an article in Kovetz Beisarim V'Yisrael, and he just cites, just to give you an example of how widespread this was. The Ramah mentions this from Moshe Isserles, that this was the minhag. He says to ask the Kutim, that's the non-Jews, l'nagim b'klei shir. And that's in Tshuvos Harama 125. He also quotes Minhagim of Frankfurt, that on Shabbos and Shacharis, this is the wedding, the Shabbos before the wedding. I believe, yes, it's before the Shabbos Harishona. No, this is the first Shabbos after they're married. What did happen? As they're walking to shul, all these different musicians would walk in front of the chassan. It was like a big procession, and they would play the music. And also the women would take the bride to shul, also playing music. And then he quotes that there were places in Worms, the Shabbos before the chasana, they would bring the kala to the Beis Knesset, im klezemarim, with again non-Jewish musicians. He cites here that the Sephardic communities, the Knesset Agdola, he's writing from Constantinople, that the minhag and kushta is the Hebrew term for Constantinople, and he quotes the Chida, that they would play music when they brought a Sefer Torah in, and that in Egypt they would, at a Sudas Bris Milah, they would do it as well. And then he quotes another Tshuva Sefer that the Jews would play. This is the Maisa Avram Ashkenazi. I think he was Rishon LeZion in Eretz Yisrael in the 19th century. Jews would play drums on Shabbos at the Sheva Brachos. They just bang the drums. And he quotes the Ben Ish Chai. This is the 20th century. That in Baghdad, when the chassan would leave the base, the chatan would leave the base at the Knesset after Shacharit to go home. Non-Jews would go before and playing musical instruments. This, it's not the minhag today. You want to know why? I don't know why it's not the minhag today, but here you can see, I looked up, I was curious. I knew he would have something to say about it. Rabbi Melamed in Penine Halacha, he says, here you see it under the section, Schlirat, if you hire non-Jewish musicians for a wedding on Shabbos, he quotes, it says that many hold it's mutter, but he says that today the heter doesn't exist because in those days they used to do Friday afternoon weddings to combine the Suda Shabbos with the wedding. But today we do big weddings in halls and you need a lot of work and there's a chash that this will lead us to Chilul Shabbos. Whatever the reason is, the minhag has not been going on for over 100 years or more in the Ashkenazic world. Much the Sephardic world, they don't, despite what Rav Yosef says, I'm not aware of any Sephardic community that actually does bring in non-Jewish musicians. Even though Rav says 100% it's permissible, I'm wondering if the reason it stopped is because it just looked strange. And people said, well, it doesn't look right. Although that doesn't make much sense. What do you mean it doesn't look right? If halacha is you can do it, both the Shulchan Aruch and the Ramah say what's not looking right. But we have other examples of that. And that's, you can't do it anymore. And what can I say? It's, we don't do it. I've never heard of it. If anyone's heard of anyone doing it, please let me know. But as far as I know, we never do it. I want to go back to the tshuva for a second, because I want to do something which is really relevant to the tshuva, but hold on, let me get rid of this. But I think it's interesting, and I don't know the answer, and maybe one of you can help me on this. In citing the different opinions that talk about in the dispute over, let's say you have a minhag that causes a kilkul, causes a problem, and even appears to be invited. We have minhagim, it says, shafim hu neged din Torah. Even if it appears to violate, when it says neged, it means it appears. We have a minhag and it seems to be against Torah law. So the Shar Ephraim says, Ein levatel minhag. Well, what is that about? If it's against the Torah, how could you not get rid of it? Well, because there's this assumption that there must be a reason. And if the minhag is of long standing, we don't abolish it. There doesn't seem to be many rules on this, because sometimes the big rabbis say, if it's a minhag that's against halacha, d'oraisa, or even d'rabbanan, we say this is not a valid minhag. Rather, this is a minhag that we have to reverse the letters, and the letters of minhag also spell Gehenna. So this is a bad minhag, you have to get rid of it. But then we have others who say that no, this is a minhag of long standing. It appears to us to be against halacha, but since we know that this is not just a minhag for the masses, we know that the rabbis tolerated this minhag. It must have a reason, and therefore we're going to keep it the way it is. Now, in the midst of quoting the various opinions, he says that, oh no, it's the next page. He quotes it. No, it's here. He says, yes, he says, he's quoting the opinions, the second line. He says, Uvesefer Tosefes Bikurei Katsir Chitim. He says, the 13 rabbi signs on this. It's actually Bikurei Katsir, not Chitim. I want to tell you what this book is for a second. This is an early Torah journal. This and the one in Amsterdam, Eitz Chaim, I think it is, the Pri-Eitz Chaim. I think the first issue of Pri-Eitz Chaim appeared before this, although this has a few issues, and so it's either one or the other. I have to check the dates. I think this is the second Torah journal ever to appear. It appears first as Tosefet Bikurei Katsir, then the Reshit Bikurei Katsir, then you have Tosefet, and then you have Itur Bikurei Katsir. This appears in Venice in 1715, but it's published by the yeshiva, the Talmud Torah. They call it a Talmud Torah, but that's the yeshiva of Ferrara. And what it was is you had all the different rabbis, the Talmidei Chachamim, who were members of this yeshiva, would publish their tshuvot. And the editors of it, one of the we see here was Yitzhak Lamprunti, the famous Yitzhak Lamprunti, the Pachad Yitzhak. I said already that Professor David Malkiel was just coming out with a book in English, Academic Studies Press, on this is encyclopedia, multi-volume encyclopedia of halacha called the Pachad Yitzhak. And you see there I don't actually think technically they're not called cherubs, they're putti, I think, which we use the term putti for young boys like that. And you see that, you see they're naked, and the nakedness in Italy, they had a different approach to the human body that we're used to, less puritanical, and I could show you numerous title pages of seforim, which have not just men, women in various states of undress. If you look at my book, Changing the Immutable, I have some pictures, I discuss it. I know of no example of any rabbi that ever protested these title pages, these pictures. And I don't need to show you them now. You can just look in the book, or I'm sure you've seen them all. Today, they never would. They were considered unsneistic. But I think it's almost like the Catholic justification of the human body in paintings, the same thing. Pope John Paul II even gave a speech on this, which you can find online, about when they reworked the Sistine Chapel, and he spoke about the human body. That's the only way I can explain it. It definitely was not regarded as unsneous. You have this and you don't only have it in Italian printing and in Amsterdam printings, you even have it in Eastern European printings as well. So leave that aside, that's not an issue. What I want to show you though is something else, which I can't understand looking for assistance. There's another sefer, early sefer, it's called Mayan Ganim, also it's in Venice. This sefer is known because it's quoted by the Torah Tamima, and he created a big mistake because this is a book of letters. If you want to practice and learn how to write Hebrew, it's like a book of how to write letters. And it was put together by a Shmuel Archivolti, who actually was a Dayan, and he was a posek also. So there's significance to the letters as well. It's not a volume of Shelos Chuvos, of responsa, although that's what the Torah Tamima calls it, and it's often quoted. And for a long time, no one ever actually, till the modern internet age, when it was put online, no one actually saw the book inside. They were just relying on what the Torah Tamima says. Why does Torah Tamima quote it? Well, because in one of the letters, it's the letter writer who's the author. So I guess you can, it has significance, although it's not a volume of responsa, makes the argument that the prohibition on women studying Torah does not apply if the woman is really motivated and she wants to study Torah. And that's quoted again and again. Okay, very nice. If you go through this book, it has 5 sections. And I'm going to go through it right now with you. And look what happened. And this is from the copy put online. It comes from the Hasidic library, Lubavitch, Agudas Hasidic Chabad. So first there's the introduction. And then you get to the first section. It's coming right up here. Hold on to your seats. Well, first of all, there's a pasuk here. It says the pasuk is in Breshis, V'na yotze me'Eden, the river went out from Eden to water the garden, umisham yiparei v'haya l'arba rashim, and from thence it went out to be 4 heads. This book is going to have 5. It's going to say 5 heads because there's 5 chapters. But look what the little boys are doing. And can anyone explain to me why this is obviously this is part of the artistic symbolism in Italy during the, 17th century, 18th or 17th century. 3 boys urinating there, the putti, I don't know, and this is repeated 4 more times at the beginning of each section. If anyone knows about art history, I tried to find the answer. All I could find was that you have a couple in Italy, you have a couple fountains that have images like that. But for the life of me, I don't know why you'd put it in a book. And for the double life of me, I don't know why you put it in a sefer. I'm not going to say it's unsneistic. It just seems stupid. I mean, I don't know what's, but that's because I'm missing something. There must be something here that I don't know. And I just thought you'd find this interesting, that this appears in a sefer. Once you start looking in these old seforim, you come across all sorts of weird stuff. I'll take any suggestions. Okay, getting back to our story. So we just saw the Recanati permitting an organ and permitting a non-Jew to play it on Shabbos. Now, already in the 17th century, the tshuva we just saw is the early 19th century. Already in the 17th century, there were synagogues in Italy that had organs in them, as well as synagogues that used other instruments. If you want to get the whole story on this, there's an article in this volume. This is called Asupot. Believe it or not, the word is Asupot, even though everyone calls it Asufot. But it's Asupot. This is an annual that was put out by Yad HaRav Nissim, edited by Meir Benayahu, the unbelievably prolific Meir Benayahu. Anyone who's into Jewish scholarship loves Meir Benayahu. The way he was able to put together so much stuff from everywhere. One of the most prolific scholars on so many different areas. One of his areas was the study of Italian Jewry. Another was Shabtai Tzvi and all Jews of the Orient, they used to call it. But by then I mean the Middle East, North Africa. He's the son of Rav Nissim, Yitzhak Nissim. He took the name Benayahu. I would end at that, but I do also have to add one thing. In the famous book by Matti Friedman, all about the Geniza, which won this $100,000 award. If you haven't read it, I encourage you to read it, in which Matti Friedman argues that although we usually assume that the Aleppo Codex, that the Aleppo Codex was destroyed in the rioting and was burnt, and all we have is a little bit of section, he brings evidence to show that when it made its way to Israel, it was complete, and that it still exists. And he accuses, and I mean, well, one of the Syrian rabbis said it's Motzi Shemra, so I find it hard to, I don't want to get involved with this, but it does, for someone who's an admirer of Meir Benayahu, I can't believe this, but he makes the claim that Meir Benayahu, he thinks Meir Benayahu stole it, and that it was lifted, and the only person who fits to have lifted it was Meir Benayahu. But you should just know that as a side bit, but I don't want to. Oh, and so when he came to speak, he was going to speak in Brooklyn. There was a cherem put out by the Syrian rabbis. Don't go hear him, this Matti Friedman. I don't know who he is. I don't know personally. I just know it's a great book, but I hope it's not true. Okay, so he has an article in the first volume, Das Chachmei Italia al Negina Ba'ugav B'Tfila, a whole long essay with unpublished stuff about the opinion of the Italian sages on playing, using an organ during davening. And on page 269, he says, he quotes an early source that mentions the organ. Yeah, so you could see that here, right? Of course, other instruments, they did. In truth, many of the reforms in Italy, or some of the reforms in Italy could be, Germany, could be traced to Italy. I'm going to show you one more thing in Benayahu before we go forward. I think I made, on page 310, he has a tshuva here from Abraham Reggio. That's the father of the famous Isaac Samuel Reggio, but he's the Rav of Gorizia. He says, the question is, can non-Jews play music for you on the last day of Simchas Torah? And he says, Ladidi nirali shamutar. And he says he doesn't like it because he doesn't like the whole idea that non-Jews are playing. He says it's a gnai that non-Jews will help us praise God. But he doesn't see a halachic problem with them playing it. And then on page 311, he quotes an Italian rabbi from the 19th century who affirms the idea of playing an organ on Shabbos. And he says that Jews, that you can play the organ. You don't even need a non-Jew. And he argues that the takana, that the gezerah, that we might fix it, doesn't apply because we don't know how to fix organs. You know, the average person doesn't know how to fix it. That's a more extreme position, but you see what was going on. Okay, as I said, many of the reforms that we're going to talk about already were done in Italy. That is, the reforms advocated in Germany were done in Italy. But the intention of Italian rabbis was not conscious reform. This just developed naturally. And they were justified by halachic. As I said, there were rabbis, there were Italian shuls that had organs. Italian shuls had organs once it started to get going in the 19th century, although, as I said, already back into the 16th century, 1600s, I should say, not 17th century, 1600s. Well, there was a few, and once it started going in the 19th century, it continued until the 1960s or early 1970s. Italian shuls had organs played by non-Jews. But it's not just that. Italian sermons were always given in the vernacular, many years before the rise of the Reform movement. We also know there are places in Italy that the Torah was not read with trup. Something which, as I said before, that I find is boring, and I don't see how you could read the Torah without trup. Not to mention the fact that the Gemara already speaks about trup. It talks about that this is there's different opinions. Does this go back to Moshe or to Ezra, or whatever? But it's mentioned as here. I'll show you. It's in Megillah 3a. So what do they say? The Avinu b'Mikra, they're giving a drasha. Elu piskei ta'amim. What does it mean that the book of Ezra, they made them understand? They understand these are the cantillation notes. At least that's according to one opinion. Others saying it's a Masoretic note. So, I mean, the trup is not something just invented by musicians. This trup is something that's essential to the laning. In Rabbi Greenwald's book, Yekusi Yehuda Greenwald, he has an entire volume with Toldos HaReformation HaDatit BeGermania Uva-Ungaria, a history. And it's a great book because he knows all the rabbinic literature. He doesn't know the other literature, but he knows rabbinic literature. We've spoken about it many times with Rabbi Greenwald. A history of the religious reform in Germany and Hungary. On page 43, see, he's talking all about reading Torah without a trup. We're going to see Aaron Horan says, I read without trup, and he makes it into a big deal. On page 43, note 3, he says, after saying how crazy this is and how it goes against the Gemara, he says, what's really strange in my eyes, shaharbe admorim shakori b'torah b'shabbosos gamkin kori b'li negina. Hayitachen? Rabbi Greenwald says that, how do you explain the fact, after he just said why Koren is wrong, that you have Hasidic rabbis who, when they read the Torah, they read it without trup? Are there? I'm assuming. I don't know what that means. I think it means that the Hasidic Rebbe. I hope this isn't disrespectful to the Rebbes. Well, I guess I'm not mentioning the Rebbe. There's a Rebbe. Some Rebbes like to play violins. There's one Rebbe. He plays violin, he's big into this, and all the Hasidim stay around him, and they think that holy sparks are going up. The guy's the worst violin player. It's embarrassing. He's off key. It's terrible, but it's a big deal for them. But and he has to play violin because that's in his Hasidus, that's a tradition. I'm thinking that the Rebbes maybe that read without trup. It's not that they read without trup. It's that they can't read the Torah. They just don't have the skill. So they get up and they just read it. They'll say, Bereshis bara, Ines Hashemayim, Des Aretz. It sounds like they're reading without trup, but they really are reading with trup, but it's as if they're reading without trup. That's what I would assume. But Rabbi Greenwald, he knows this a lot better than me, and he's from that world. He says that they read it without negina.
But negina is the tune.
Tune, that's the trup.
That's different. No, the trup is the Ta'amei HaMikra.
No, negina is the trup. That's what he means here. That's negina is the trup. It's the tune. Trup is the tune. That's what he means. That's the issue here. There's no other negina. That's the negina. We'll see. And he says this after attacking Chorin. Chorin, we'll see in a few minutes, but Chorin proudly says, from the time I became a rabbi here, I read the Torah. I don't read the Torah, but nigunim hahema with the trup, because that destroys the kavana. That's what Chorin says. Now, in terms of the Italian shuls, I asked Professor Bonfield, Reuven Bonfield, great scholar of Italian Jewry. He actually was the secretary when he left Italy. He was a rabbi in Milan. He's retired now. He's at the Hebrew University, wrote two very important volumes on Italian Jewish history, one on the rabbis of Italy. I asked him about how long into the 20th century did the Italian shows have organs? And he says, if I'm not mistaken, in the 60s, an organ was still played by a Gentile in Florence on Yom Tov. In Milan, it was equally played on Yom Tov in the late 50s. I think I personally stopped it in the early 60s. And then I also asked Rabbi Desaini, and he also said each synagogue had its own rules, but there were organs in Venice, Florence, Rome, Turin. As far as I know, he says there was always a goy playing on Shabbos, and Shus to Shus. He says in Rome, the practice of playing on Shabbos and Yom Tov lasted until the early 60s. I think it actually lasted longer. I say that because I know someone whose wife is Italian, and she's about my age, and she told me she remembers the organ, and that would have taken us into the early 70s. Here, let me tell you something else. This is a book that came out a couple of years ago. We're going to later hear about the shuls in Prague. 13 Steps. Orthodox Judaism in America comes of age, my life and times, Rabbi Joseph Karasik. Hold on, I want to pull something up here on my different computer here. He was a macher in the OU, and he wrote this book that like a memoir of his time in the OU. So on page 117 and 118, he's talking, what year is this? In 1969. The question was the Jewish communities were coming closer together, and they brought over some French rabbis to be trained at YU, I guess. It just says the OU brought them over to be trained. I assume it means to be trained at YU, but he doesn't say exactly. He says postgraduate study and rabbinical field work. The issue they were having, though, was that the seminary, JTS, was also trying to attach itself to the French traditional Jewish community. Why? What's the thing there? Because the Cathedral Synagogue of Paris, the seat of France's chief rabbi, this is the Consistoire, and all the big synagogues that were associated with the official community, boasted a mixed choir, men and women, Jews and non-Jews, and an organ that was used on Shabbat. So what do you make of this? Well, should this be an Orthodox community connected to us, or should it be with the conservatives? We'd see why the official Jewish community in France would be inclined perhaps to the conservatives. But Karasik explains how they were able to convince the chief rabbi, Rabbi Kaplan, that they had to restructure their choir, that is no women, no non-Jews, and remove the organ. And they did. And from the early 1970s, you don't have any organs in the French synagogues. And he cites that a powerful French layman said to him, Rabbi Karasik, you save French Judaism, because had they not done that, then the official French Jewish community would have allied itself with the seminary and conservative Judaism. The next rabbi, let's introduce him briefly before we end. There's 4 tshuvot. Remember, we said there's 4 responds in this volume of Noga HaTzedek. The next one we'll look at is from the next rabbi to reply is Aaron Chorin, rabbi of Arad in Hungary. The Chassam Sofer would later coin the expression, and this is how he's constantly referred to, as Acher, because Aaron Chorin signed his name in German. He wrote Aaron Chorin Rabbiner. So the Chassam Sofer said Aaron Aleph Chorin Chet Rabbiner. That makes him Acher. Acher is how Elisha ben Avuya would be termed. So he's the evil one. Whereas the first 2 we've seen, when we get to the rabbis who respond, they give lots of respect to the Italian rabbis, because they know the Italian rabbis are not reformers. They're just liberal, and they're reflecting an Italian sentiment. But Aaron Chorin, who I have to say is the biggest Talmud Chacham of all these 4, student of the Noda B'Yehuda, a real learned rabbi, so he's a challenge. In the end, he really goes off the deep end. But at this time, he was still in, he's the Rav of a city, and he's still in the rabbinic world, although he was involved in machokas. I'll tell you about some of the machokas. We spoke in previous classes about the machokas, but I'll return again because I assume that I should do each unit, each semester, we should erase each theme anew. So the fact that we dealt with some of the stuff about swordfish, we'll resume briefly next time, or not swordfish, surgeon as well. But so what we're going to see next class is we'll see Rav Aaron Chorin and his argument. And he picks up on a whole different issue, or a few different issues, but in particular, davening in the vernacular. That's going to be a very tough one, because how do you forbid davening in the vernacular when the Mishnah is clear and all the codes are clear that you can daven in the vernacular? And we're going to see sources that people who didn't know any better routinely davened in the vernacular. So we will see Aaron Chorin, and then that's what we'll devote ourselves to next time. So let me get to the questions here. Let me make a mark where we are. See the questions and the comments. So many questions, so many comments. I learned so much from all this. Susanna says she was surprised that everybody stood for Zachar this year. 3 years ago, I was on a different show. I've only paid attention to this because it's my parsha, and I even read it last year. They needed someone to read it, so they've started standing up. This comes from the masses. Another change that has happened is that now in pretty much all the shows, not Chabad shows, they keep it their minhag. When I was laning, when I was at my bar mitzvah and years afterwards, what you did is you read the pasuk, you said Timcha as Zecher Amalek, then you repeated Timcha as Zecher Amalek. Now they have you repeat the whole pasuk. That seems to be standard now. When there were those, it seems the Rav held that you should do the whole pasuk, but lots of others, Ramosha and other, I believe Ramosha, and lots of others say that no, you're just supposed to do, because what you're trying to show is that there's a suffix on this word. So Zecher, in fact, Chabad just does Zecher. But so there's many who hold that you just repeat the 3 words. Whatever you do, you're fine. That's not the issue. The issue is that it's interesting in that a valid minhag affirmed by lots of gedolim. In fact, I think there are many more who think that you should only do the 3 words and who think you should do the whole pasuk. That has gone out of style. Exactly what you're not supposed to do. But you say it's the minhag of the show, but it's not really the minhag of a show because no one really pays attention. It's not like any show ever established. Not like Chabad has a minhag. And what seems to have happened in the last 10 years is that it doesn't seem from enough. That it seems that, and now if you try to do it without doing a whole pasuk, they'll say you're wrong. It doesn't seem from enough, and therefore standing up also, you can come up with all sorts of ex post facto reasons. You could say, well, it's a mitzvah, so you just stand up for the mitzvah, all that, and all that is fine, but that's not the minhag. The minhag was never to stand up, and why should you stand up? The minhag, it's the idea is you're supposed to hear it, and so if you want to stand up, fine. That's nothing wrong with standing up. But now they make it seem like there's something wrong with sitting down, and no one remembers. They won't remember in 15, 20 years that this is a completely new practice. I'm recording it for posterity, that this is a new minhag that has been developed before our eyes. And I even saw a few years ago, the Shavuos before COVID, I was well, I don't need to get it. It has to do with the 10 Commandments, so we don't need to get into that. The video, yes, Harvey says it was amazing. I happen to like it too. But it's not davening in the way people normally think of davening, which maybe is fine. It gives you kavanah. It's a different experience. Wait till you hear what some of the gedolim, one gadol in particular has to say. His argument is going to be davening is not supposed to be about joy, about feeling good, about that you're supposed to stand in davening like you're before the king who has his life in your hands. Because so very much at odds with how we look at things today. And yes, Asher says that Rabbi Eli Kranzler does slichot. Yeah, slichot. Slichot already is an old tradition. The Karabach Shul, you can watch it also. But we're talking about Rosh Chodesh. And that was the video from my son's yeshiva I was going to show you. But this, see, my son's yeshiva was just one guy with a guitar. This, you have the guitar, you have the what was it, the little flute there and everything, and the drums. And you could see that certain people would say that this is not davening, this is performance. And as I said, it's a real question. If you're playing the instrument, how much kavana do you have? Well, unless you say, no, you have more kavana. Maybe you're focused on it. I like it, but I could see how some wouldn't. So I don't even know who that person is in the video. Thank you, M.H. Laserson. Ellie Bear or Beer, I don't know how to pronounce it, who founded United Hatzel in Israel. Very nice. Someone privately texted me that the Heicha Kedushah, it depends if it's Shacharis or Musaf. Shacharis, you start with the shots, but Musaf, you start after Kedusha. I'm not sure why. What's the difference? Should be the same. Chaim says that I've heard of Soloveitchik recommends starting with the Chazan. That's what they did at YU in the 1970s. And that's the way I always understood it, because then you have it's like you're doing Tefillah B'Tzibur. Mike also called my attention to Ramosha. Ramosha doesn't think that Tefillah B'Tzibur has to mean that you're saying it together with them like that. The Rav has a different position in general. The Rav held that Chazaras Hashatz in and of itself is a kiyum of a mitzvah. So the Rav Soloveitchik and his followers, they stand with their feet together during the whole Chazaras Hashatz. So I understand the Rav would have that opinion. But as we saw, the Ramah, who didn't have the Rav's opinion about Chazaras Hashatz being a kiyum, he also held that you should do that. Marc says, I talked about people being named after holidays. And what about, what about Yom Tov? Okay, that's you're right. That Yom Tov is a good name. Yes, that's a challenge to my point. What I said is I didn't see the name Pesach, but yet we have lots of people named Yom Tov. Yom Tov Lippman Heller is a famous one. Not only Yom Tov, that we have a medieval name, Tavyomi, or late medieval Tavyomi. Tavyomi is Yom Tov. So I don't know. Hyman says the name Pesach, vocalized with comments under the pay, appears in Ezra and Nehemiah Divrei Yamim, but they weren't being named that because that's not a significant person. Good point, though.
Dr. Shapiro, you were asking about the difference in Shachrit and other davening in the Heicha Kedushah. The whole difference why you have to start with the Chazan is the idea that you have to connect the Geula to the Shmona Esrei. You're not allowed to make a
hefsek, maybe hefsek. Oh, that's okay. That's what, the person who that make a hefsek. Oh, okay. But yeah, that's a very good point. It's the idea is we don't want to make a hefsek from when we say geula to tefillah. So shachris, you would do it together with them. Musaf, you don't have that concern. In general, we never do it. Other than special Portuguese, we never do Heicha Kedushah for shachris. We only do it for mincha. But that's a good point. Thank you. So someone privately says, so those of us who are taught that we should walk away when you hear music on Shabbos may walk through a park and enjoy. I have to say that I was never told that you should walk away. I was told that if a Jew is playing it, let's say you're in Central Park and you see some Israelis playing music, then yes, you should walk away. But if non-Jews are playing it, why should you have to walk away? I never heard that. I can't even see why there'd be a reason to walk away. Ellie says that a very knowledgeable Talmid Chacham said that the musicians at weddings used to be goyim. They were the first klezmer musicians because the wedding held on Friday afternoon. Very interesting. I didn't. Well, obviously, if they're playing after Shabbos, they are goyim. But that's nice. You say that you were at the Young Israel, the West Side, and it was apparently built as a Reform shul, still has the organ in the balcony. If it has the organ there, it wasn't built as an Orthodox shul. I haven't asked Menachem Wecker about that point that I mentioned. I don't know what he has to do with it. You'll tell me. Yes, so M.H. Lazen said Italian Jewry has been influenced by surrounding culture, where the putti has been widely used in artwork and public monuments, 100%. And also, like you walk through Florence and you see nude statues, let's say. So but even in Lublin, in the printing, they had that as well. Yeah, the Amalia, correct. I forgot all the details about the Aleppo Codex, but he says that this idea that we have that it was burnt is not true. Everyone should go read the book if you want. It's a real page turner. And you get to the end there and you see who he's accusing. I felt very uncomfortable reading that. Okay, thank you, Rabbi Shudnow. Paul says that Chabad read the Torah more or less without trup. If that's the case that you're referring to, it's because the Chabad people don't know it well. But if you go online, the famous Baal Koreh, Baal Kriya, technically, from 770 reads it beautifully. And there's a number of other Chabadnikim online who read it very well. So there's no shita in Chabad to read it without trup. And someone rejects that there. They said one of the best, you can go online, the Chabad site that has all the Torah reading and other things where you can link to all the wonderful stuff they have, the Rambam, etc. You can listen to Kriyas Torah of all the of every parsha, and you hear the famous Chabad, I forget his name now, Baal Koreh, and he reads it great. And guess what? I went there. I wanted to see what he does. This Purim, is it Ritz Pot? Because all the Ashkenazim read Tzpat. I shouldn't say all, but a lot of them do. Just go on YouTube, and lo and behold, you listen to the Chabad Baal Koreh, and he gets it right. It's Ritzafat, the way it should be. And I was looking online just yesterday, and I found another Chabadnik, a totally different one, Ritzafat. So at least from the two I found online, I can tell you that those Chabad guys who are laning Megillah, they know how to do it, and they read it beautifully. Was the Rav involved in the French decision? He doesn't. I'm frozen. He doesn't say anything about the Rav Soloveitchik, so I don't know. But I think it's obvious. You couldn't be a member of the OU. You couldn't bring them in with organs and all that. Okay, so Paul says that the Chabadnikim he thought didn't do it. That he hasn't seen a lot of Chabadnikim who are not such good laners. Listen, you often have in the Chabad shul, the only guy who knows how to lane is the Baal Koreh, and because the people don't know how to lane, so he has to do it every week. So he doesn't necessarily have time to prepare. So when he gets up, he's just reading it fast, not necessarily because he doesn't know how to, but because he didn't have time to prepare, or maybe he doesn't know how to do that well, but he's the only one who can lane. But it's not a shita or anything like that. And someone privately texts me that Minhag Frankfurt is to lane Timcha Ezecher Melech only once and at Seirin. Well, that's the original Minhag, and the Sephardic world doesn't repeat it. This only is a 20th century minhag, really, that became popular. Yes, we have testimony before the 20th century, but it's because of the Mishnah Brura, and it's only after World War II. The fact that all our synagogues now do this isn't even 100 years old, that they were not laning it twice in Hungary. They were not laning it twice in most places in Poland. They were definitely not laning it in the German minhagim, but it became accepted because of the Mishnah Brura. There you go, Paul. Thank you. Paul has the answer to my question. The Nahar Yotze Mi'edin Hashkot Etagan. There it is, to water the garden. So that's what the putti are doing. They're watering it. I think you're onto something. I think you're correct there. Thank you very much for that. So many questions. I don't want to, let me just
think we lost him, no? I think, okay, we can wait, I'm sure. While we wait for him to come back.
Rabbi
I'll-
Kalman, his video froze.
Hello,
and
everyone.
It went black
Yeah,
for a
okay,
while. and
there we
then it
go. We
came
figured
back.
it'd be back. Okay, you're back. Dr. Mark, you back? I think you're back.
I'm on my reserve. Can you see me? I'm
No, I
on my
don't see you
reserve
at this
computer.
moment, but fine, it's okay. We hear you.
Okay, I just wanted to answer 2 or 3 more before we end it. I don't know what happened to my, I'm coming back on. Hold on with the other one. Let me, I don't know what happened there.
Recording in progress. Recording in progress. Recording in progress. Recording in progress.
Okay, I'm back.
So you've got background noise.
Yes. Okay, I'm back now. Okay, maybe that's a good sign to end, but let me go into 2 more questions. Actually, no, because I've lost it all because all the chats on mine went away. So why don't we leave? That must be a sign from heaven that Ruth adds that that's the last thing I say, that they did not repeat in Parsha Zachar and Breuer Shul. Well, of course they wouldn't. In Breuer Shul, they're going to follow the old minhagim. It's almost impossible to get them to change their minhagim. Thank you all for your comments. And if those of you who sent in comments that I didn't get to, and I was blocked off, if you think it's really important and where you want me to get to it and deal with it next week, email it to me and I'll pick up with it next week. It must have been an interesting class tonight because I think I could have gone on another half hour with the comments, but that'll take us a little too long. So Rabbi Kelman, good to see you back with us.
Yes. Thank you. Have nice talk to some of the parents, but I'm back. Okay, thank you. And okay, tomorrow morning, Aaron Kohler finishes up his fascinating series on Megillat Esther at 9:30 a.m. And both of our speakers tomorrow who will be in Israel afterwards will be speaking the regular Eastern time. So Rachel Sharansky-Dansker at 11 a.m. Eastern. I'll remind them again, but 11 a.m. Eastern, then Alex Israel at 1 p.m. Eastern. And then we're off until Thursday night because Purim. The community, that Marc's been interviewing the last number of weeks, we finished for this round. And of course, Dr. Sokolow and Shuli's classes will not take place in Purim. We will have Parshat HaShavua given by yours truly. So, on Thursday evening at 8:30. Don't want to burden other people, but to ask to give, so I'll be giving the Parsha here 8:30 Thursday night. That'll be after tomorrow next year. And then Friday morning, my class on the Siddur. And then Monday, we'll come back with Rabbi Leipzig. I will be sending out an email probably tomorrow. I think they're all up on the website and you can for sure register sort of like once for all for our Pesach programs. I think 5 different speakers speaking. For Pesach, this class and the regular classes will continue up until Pesach, regular classes, the ongoing ones, and then we'll also have a number of classes just for Pesach itself. That will be a separate registration, a separate passcode and all that kind of stuff, but you can just register once. So that's available on the website, or you can scroll through, but just to let you know. And okay, invite a friend, please, to come and join us, and we look forward to learning with you and to all your comments and suggestions, and everybody should have a Laila Tov, and we should hear her good news, Besorot Tovat, and okay, Laila Tov, everybody. Thank you very much.
I did that. I invited several people.
Okay, good. That's it. That's the price of admission. Right, okay. Laila Tov. Vakasha.